really a really tough one for him to take, and for the club too.
Yeah, I think everyone would have had a reasonable indication of the extent of that just by Paul's reaction. He was devastated at the weekend past. We're the same. We sit the same. But again, as always, we'll support Paul the best way we possibly can. And the medical guys have got that process well up and running to try and start his recovery as quick as we possibly can. But you know, I think by the information that's been put out there, I think we'll all understand that looks like season over for Paul, which is really disappointing. From a personal point of view, I feel he's been one of the, if not the most consistent player since I come to the football club a couple of years ago. You know, he's made captain, and he's just a big influence in everything that we do on and off the pitch. So obvious disappointment, obvious blow for us.
On a personal note for him, you know, we hear about a player getting injured, but it must be tough, even though he's a seasoned pro, for him to take as well.
Yeah, and I think just because Paul generally trains and plays all the time, I know he's come back from a longer term injury, but he's not really been used to it in his career. I think the fact that he's well over 500 games now would suggest to you that he's been a robust player and somebody that's always out there through thick or thin. And I think the bit that probably people struggle to understand with that is that has a particular mindset. You know, there are players that can be unfortunate and have had lots and lots of injuries, and you know, they've had to brace themselves from an early age to be able to deal with that. And I think from a personal point of view, I was someone that had pretty much one injury in my career, and it was the one that finished me at the age of 30. And I'm not suggesting that for Paul, but it changed. You know, it's something that you've never faced. So we have to make sure as a football club and as a group of people that we get around about Paul and make sure that we help him along the way. I've seen him obviously in the last couple of days since it happened, and he's an old first guy. He's the type of guy that realises what's ahead of him and what he has to do, and he'll not feel sorry for himself and he'll go on with it.
And out with Paul, how is the rest of the team news for the St Johnstone game?
Well, listen, it's not great. It's not great. We've encountered a lot of issues since the start of the season, but I would feel that in terms of injuries that this is possibly the worst stage that we're at, and I feel that if I can sort of address it just now, then that stops those questions. No disrespect, every single week. We're looking at a couple of months for Steve Seddon. Been out. He had further investigation yesterday, and the fallout from that is that we're probably looking at 2 months for him. Aston Oxborough, again, further investigation, further consultation on that. Looks like we'll be without him for what looks like could be 3 months. So obviously these are massive blows to us. Add Paul McGinn into that. We hope that Lennon Miller gets his boot off next week, but again, we need to wait and see how that goes. Jair Tavares had been for further investigation. He sustained an injury at the tail end of last week. Liam Gordon is currently following concussion protocol, which the medical guys are well on top of. He's feeling better, but you understand we took him off the pitch. And you understand that he never took part last week, so he's obviously going through that process, and that's something that we never take a risk with. Ross Callaghan's back on the pitch, but you know, Ross hasn't played really. I think he had a few minutes against Ross County, so we need to wait and see where that goes. And I think kind of last check, looking at the board the other day, we were looking at 9 pretty serious injuries and 9 players that were without. That's hard for us to absorb, of course it is. And from that, you're looking at a lot of significant players and some players that have been very good for us. Some for a long period of time, some since they come to the football club. So it's not an excuse. It's just that in an injury front, it's a bleak outlook. Me, as always, I'm the most positive person in the world. And what we do is we start to focus around the players that are available and the players that are fit. And that's what I've done since the start of the season. And we look to kick-start this next part of the season. And obviously that starts with the Scottish Cup, which we'll no doubt go on to.
With that news, is there any scope for you to go into the January window and add to your squad?
Yeah, well, listen, I've spoken to the board and I've spoken to Brian, our chief executive. What we want to try and do is try and make sure that we've got options and positions. I'm sure you'll see with some of the names that we're talking about there and some of the people that are missing that it's a huge loss. But what we don't have is, you know, I'm watching 1 or 2 clubs out there paying fees for players and, you know, have significantly bigger resources than what we do, if we can try and be cute and clever and pick off one or two players that we think can help us along the way, that can sort of step in the obvious voids that we start to see, then that's what we'll try and do. But this is really difficult. It's difficult for a lot of clubs, but essentially what happens with clubs like Motherwell, and it did for us last January as well, is we need to wait for so many things to happen at potentially bigger clubs before anything starts to move. And only at that point, because you don't have hundreds of thousands or even millions to start throwing at players, which will make a decision quicker, then you have to be dependent on other clubs and other things shifting there. We'll have to be patient. We're trying our best. We're working endlessly to try and make sure that we can strengthen the group and help the group out. But I can't really put a timescale on that. But what I can finish off by saying is that the club have been supportive in that. That we, you know, there's been some obvious milestones there for us getting to a cup semi-final. The sale of players, which has been pretty evident over the last wee spell. They want to try and help us out as much as they can within the remit that we work from.
Sure, I know you've named obviously a catalogue of players there, but how's Apostolos?
Yeah, sorry, that's one I missed. I should sit with a list in front of me, shouldn't I? Yes, he looks like he'll be out for another couple of weeks as well, so I'm not expecting him back this week. Feeling better, it has to be said, but that was there was an injury there in terms of a tear in his calf.
You got to maybe a point in December where you were maybe seeing light at the end of the tunnel with sort of these longer term injuries, to now be back at a point where you've got 5 or 6 guys out for months at a time. How do you deal with that mentally as a manager when you're making squad selections? And I suppose as well for the squad, how do they deal with that when they're seeing guys that they're pals with and things like that being out in the change out of the treatment room again?
No, I think I do. It's not been positive for positive sake, but I think what people have to realise within this, it doesn't make it any easier. You know, I see a lot of clubs that have a lot of injuries, but to be fair, when you look at it since the start of the season to where we are now, and when we evaluate that at the start of this week, I've not really seen it as bad for as long as it has been with us. And I think some of the frustration sometimes is when you do see that wee bit of light at the end of the tunnel, you think you're getting 1 or 2 back. Kind of how the stories went for us, unfortunately, just now is that 2 or 3 go back out, and what we're not sustaining, unfortunately, is just a week injury or, you know, a 14-day rest recovery, and they'll be okay. It's significant injuries. And there'll be questions asked of myself and the football club with that number of injuries. I understand that, I get that. But again, I have to go over the point that we're very meticulous in what we do, the numbers that the players put out there every week, the prehab that they do before they go into sessions, the post-session workout, the recovery we spend so much time on it, and I trust the people here at the football club on that. And if we had one specific type of injury, then there'll be an answer for it. But the fact of the matter is that they've been all kind of different shapes and sizes, different grades in terms of tears, impact injuries, bone injuries. There's been so many different things that it's incredibly difficult to put your finger on it. But the one thing we all have to do is we have to remain positive. I don't believe in that false positive, but I look around the players that are fit and available. I still see good players there. As I say, if we can try and make 1 or 2 additions to our group, I think that will help us. And it's never a slight against the injured players, but if I start to focus too much on the injured players, I start to detract my attention for the guys that are available and in a position where they can play for us just now. All those injured players will tell you that they want to play for us just now. They're desperate to, they're gutted that they can't, but we need to put our focus on who's available, who we can work with currently, and how we can make that as best possible.
Looking at the weekend, you're playing against the sort of team back-to-back away from home, it's probably a bit of a unique situation, but when they've got such a clear, defined way of playing, they don't really stray from. Does that change the way you do set up for this weekend and also the weekend following that? Does that sort of change how you're planning for things?
Yeah, well, again, that clear, defined way, again, and I would argue with anybody that we very much have had that ourselves over the last couple of years. We do have a game model and a tactical DNA that we work from. I've said that to you before, every single day. What's been difficult about that is the changes in profile and what's available to you. You know, so it's great if you've kind of got your your first picks in a lot of different positions and the certain profiles there. You can stick to that as much as you like. Over this last few weeks, it's about trying to keep as fresh a group as we've got available to us, which can sometimes tweak and twist how you play. But yeah, we've played against St Johnstone, I think once under their current manager, and they played very similar to kind of what I've seen to this point. We obviously won the game that day, so we draw on aspects of that, and we draw on aspects of the qualities that we have available to us, and look to see if we can try and progress in the cup, because that is a very individual game in itself. I know you're saying double header, but for me, when you start to play in the Scottish Cup, it becomes that very individual game, and we focus on this one and not look too far ahead to what impact that may or may not have a week later.
What can you expect from a team, Stuart, that's gone 9 games without a win in the league? Albeit this is a different competition, but they'll be desperate to get back to winning ways.
Yeah, just going back to Ben's point there, they're going to try and keep possession, they're going to try and dominate the ball, they're very expansive, they find themselves very open in possession to try and stretch you, they show a great deal of patience in possessing the ball. I think one thing that I see with St Johnstone is that they have that real threat on the counter-attack as well. You know, when you start to take part in the game offensively, they have good pace, they're dynamic across the pitch, so that's what I see them being. That's the type of threat that I think that they'll have. But in terms of you look at some of their games, and we felt we were kind of in that process ourselves at times last year when we went 15 without a win. There were plenty of the games where we created chances, maybe didn't convert them, played well enough, but weren't quite getting the result. But I always think that team's a threat. If you didn't see that they were taking part in games and they were carrying a threat in games, then it's maybe a different thought process, but that's not what I've seen over the last period of time from St Johnstone.
I suppose you will need to remind your players that having so many out injured, the ones that are ready and available, this is a chance to make an impact in the squads.
Fact, that's an absolute fact. Great opportunity. What an opportunity to go and play. What an opportunity to try and keep yourself in the team. What an opportunity to go and try and build your profile and have a successful second part to the season. That's it. You've said it in a nutshell. That I don't know as a player how else you would think about it.
I know you've mentioned Aston down for 3 months, but how's the goalkeeper situation overall?
Yeah, well, it's not perfect. Obviously losing Christian last week, which we're really disappointed in how that came about. And then the feedback that we've had from Aston, delighted to get Archie in, delighted with his mentality as well. Because even at that point, he wasn't 100%. We weren't 100% sure how long Aston would be out for, or even whether he would have been out last weekend. And he jumped in with both feet. He was desperate to get up here. He was desperate to put himself into this environment and get an opportunity to play at this level. In terms of his goalkeeping, I said it after the game, he never made a single save in the game against Hibs, and we lost 3 goals. So he's going to have days where he'll have to make stops and be more active in the game. But no, I've been delighted with him so far. And then I think what it does is it becomes pretty evident that we need to try and get another in. Matty Conley sat on the bench for us. He's cup tied this weekend. He's played for East Kilbride, and we've been big in trying to develop Matty as well, and I'm desperate for him to continue playing games and not sit on a bench. So we're actively working really hard to try and see if we can improve that department, if you like.
On a more positive note, Scottish Cup at the weekend is a winnable game.
Yeah, listen, again, I go back to this single game of football. We've obviously profited from a good run in the League Cup, and I said after the League Cup when we went out in the semi-final, we've got another cup competition, and that's not just to slide under the carpet the one that we went out of in the semi-final stage. It's that you have that opportunity to try and emulate that. You have that opportunity to try and do something similar. We all enjoyed that run, we all enjoyed that experience, but always you want to try and see if you can take it a step further. That's how my mind works, that's how we try and drive the football club every day. But in playing against Premier League opposition, obviously you find a real difficult hurdle in front of you, but one that we'll approach is positive and as forward thinking as we possibly can.
Have you managed to get any kind of game time this week for the likes of Callum and Sam Nicholson, or just coming back from the game?
No, but we've got 2, one next week, one the week after. So it's just been very difficult with this run of games and who's been available to take a bounce game this week. What we've had is some real good work to this point on the training pitch. A little bit more structured rather than just going from game to game, which I've been majorly upbeat about. and then, as I say, we do have a bounce game next week and one the week after, which we're going to have to try and involve as many of our players as possible to really try and take them up to speed. The players that need that game time know that, but they also know that there's a chance that we'll need them here again on Saturday, depending the situation, depending the requirements of the game.
Obviously, yeah, you saw what a cup run could do with the club just this season as well. I think there's 1,500 tickets sold, and I'm sure that will increase by the end of the week as well. Is a real chance to kind of put another bit of feel good factor in the club as well.
Yeah, that's how I see it. Yeah, I was just told that I think 1,400 tickets that we've sold to go to McDermott. Quite clearly, there's an affinity with this football club and the competition. A lot of really good memories from the past, and I think it always does capture the imagination of the supporters. And it's fully our intention to go and try and make sure that we put another kind of chapter into that. And the fact that we're so well supported, getting away from home again, speaks volumes. And you're right, that number will probably go up between now and Saturday. So I think that can be an added excitement for the players, that they know they're going to get that type of backing, and that we